Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's talk about the tale of two ideas of leadership. First, you got the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, who is opening up testing to everyone. Everyone in Los Angeles, free testing, because they want to know who's got it. They want to know who's asymptomatic. They want to know who the carriers are. They want to be able to, do what we should have been doing all along. Yeah, there's that. No longer does it have to be only if you work in a hospital or a nursing home or show symptoms. They want to test as many people as possible to get as many people found out. If you're sick, we're gonna set you aside. We're gonna make sure you get the treatment you need, and that you're not going to infect everyone else. And then off of that, they're gonna do a bunch of tracing and make sure that the people you come in contact with, they get tested, and then they're safe and they're not spreading it. That's how you do this stuff. Pretty simple. A lot of hard work, a lot of organizing, a lot of needed materials. But it's what you should have been doing from the start. This is what we know. This is what works. Put that on the other side where you've got this planning commission chairman, this Ken Turnage II, in Antioch, California, who put on Facebook that basically we should do nothing. That the coronavirus, in his view, is like a forest fire that burns the old trees, the fallen trees, the brush, gets rid of the scrub. He writes, we'd have significant loss of life. We would lose many elderly. That would reduce burdens to our defunct Social Security system. Healthcare costs, once the wave subsided, make jobs available for others, and it would free up housing in which we are in dire need. He goes on to say in his Facebook page, we would lose a large portion of the people with immune and other health complications. I know it would be loved ones as well, but that would once again reduce our impact on medical, jobs, and housing. And we hear this a lot, basically from the people who are running around saying, open everything up. We don't care. If you get it and you die, that's just how it is. Until it's them. And then they're racing to the hospital saying, treat me, care for me, care for me. But these are the competing mentalities. On one side, you've got people going, we've got to do the right thing so people don't die, and we don't get everybody sick, and we don't have massive chaos. And then you've got the people going, we don't care. Don't care about you. Don't care about anybody. In fact, kill off the old people, kill off the weak. It's that survival of the fittest mentality. And what's interesting is it's generally these, 30-something white guys, real privileged, who really have a bloated self-ego. I could take on any virus and I'd win. Those folks. And you go, well, I'm okay with them getting it. In fact, I just had this conversation that, I would be okay with these people getting it. All the nitwits that are in Michigan today, all the armed protesters in the state capitol, I would be okay with them getting it. Clearly, they've got nothing better to do. I would be okay with them getting it if it just meant that they got it. The problem is they end up taking it and spreading it to other people. So everybody who was in that Capitol Day is at risk because of these people. And this comes down to the competing views of, do you believe you have the ultimate right to do whatever the hell you want without any thought or care about anyone else? And you look at those people who were in that crowd in Michigan, and you look at the people who were in Harrisburg with that debacle. You look at our vice president, who shows up at the Mayo Clinic without wearing a mask. And basically what they're all telling us is they don't care about you, me, or anyone. They don't care. It's all about them. They don't care. Not even a little bit. And what's interesting to me is, you go through and you look at, Pence, for instance. Evidently, according to Mother, he didn't know. He didn't know that he had to wear a mask. That was the defense. He didn't know. Wouldn't common sense tell you that if you're going into a hospital environment, where the virus is, that you might want to don some protective wear? Just kind of throwing that out there as a thought. Since the virus doesn't care that you're vice president. The virus doesn't care if you're wealthy. It doesn't care if you're poor. It doesn't care. It just sees you as an opportunity. But what he said, you look at his actions. What those actions said is, don't care about you. And when all these people marching around in the Capitol, they're saying, I don't care about you. Not even a little bit. But here's the thing. Here's the interesting part of Mother's comment. She said he didn't know. Nobody told him. Evidently, the Mayo Clinic had tweeted out that they did, in fact, share the mask policy with his office. But then they deleted the tweet. And it comes back to what I said yesterday. That they didn't make him wear a mask, or that they deleted this tweet because they definitely don't want this administration attempting to go after them. They don't want to get on their radar. They just, no, we're okay. I mean, it's incredible to me. You can believe nothing that comes out of this administration, not even from Mother. Not even from Mother Pence. Sad stuff. But here's the thing. Today, as we now are nearing 63,000 people dead. Now, remember, we weren't supposed to hit 47,000 until tomorrow. We're already at 63. So for all those people who are saying, well, it's not as bad as we thought it was. No, it's actually worse than what we were thinking. They were saying 60 would be, if at the end it were 60, that would be great. We're almost to 63, and we're not near the end, no matter what Jared Kushner says. But you have now this blame game going on. And Trump's been trying to do this the whole time. First, we didn't know. Who could have possibly imagined? A lot of people. In fact, this has been something that's been talked about numerous times over the years. In fact, we now find out that our intelligence agencies knew as early as November that this was going on, and still nobody decided to do anything. This is what happens, again, like I said yesterday, when you have inept Republican government. This is what they do. Nothing. So we knew in November that this was coming. So Trump, again, playing the blame game, comes out today and says the last administration left us with nothing. We started off with bad, broken tests and obsolete tests. Now, from that statement, any rational, thoughtful, sane person who has a half a brain would ask the question that Jim Acosta at CNN asked, which was, how could Obama have possibly had tests for Corona-19 when he left office in January of 17? And for those who don't know, Corona-19, or the COVID-19, is the coronavirus of 2019. That's the 19 part. It was the year. So it isn't COVID-16, it's COVID-19, which means Trump was fully in charge. But here again, he's trying to blame Obama for not having the tests. Because remember, this didn't exist then. He says that Acosta's asked him how it's possible. He said it's a new virus. How could tests be broken? And that's a great question. How is it possible they could be broken when they shouldn't have existed? Trump goes on and says, Jim, we had broken tests. We had tests that were obsolete. We had tests that didn't take care of people. And this is one of those moments where I know you're not supposed to touch your face, but like Brad Pitt playing Dr. Fauci on Saturday Night Live, it's one of those moments where it's a facepalm moment. Because any rational person would go, how did he leave you with broken tests again for something that didn't exist? Explain that. And then he goes on again, and this is the conspiracy theorists' way of getting out of this. Now, evidently, Donald Trump has evidence that the coronavirus originated in a lab in Wuhan, but he's not allowed to tell anyone. He's got super secret information. He just can't share it. Even though, and again, this comes back to one of those moments where you go, everyone in our intelligence community is saying that this wasn't man-made, that it hasn't been genetically modified. They don't know where it's coming from. Now, the statement also said that the intelligence agencies are going to continue to rigorously examine whether the virus was a result of an accident at a laboratory. It's going to be interesting to see how they spin this, because I'm of the mindset where we're on the edge of really starting the next war. And look, I was in favor of the tariffs. I was in favor of cracking down on our trade policies with China, but this is going a little bit beyond that. You've got, voices, people like Lindsey Graham saying, the world should send China the bill because this originated there. You've got now Marsha Blackburn, who is saying that we shouldn't pay them for the debt. There should be no payments. We should renege on our debt to China. And you go, that's probably not a great thing to be talking about, especially in a moment where you might have to borrow money. Because understand what happens when you renege on your debt. Interest rates will go up, and all of the debt that we already have is going to get that much worse. So it got me thinking, though, that between Mitch McConnell and his let the states go bankrupt, and Marsha Blackburn and her, hey, we're just not going to pay, it got me thinking that, maybe Donald Trump has really taken over the Republican Party, the heart and soul, not just the political apparatus, but the entire ideology that they've once, that maybe they once had. And that now the bankruptcy king is going to bankrupt this country. It's quite remarkable, and not pay our debts, which again will not bode well for the rest of the world. When you could say, well, hey, we're America, we can do that stuff, and we could probably get away with it. But I kind of gotta wonder long-term ramifications. And if you're saying we're going to do it as punishment, do you think they're just going to lie down? And the thing that gets me is we're in this weird moment where nothing you hear out of this administration you can possibly believe. Now, look, I am pining for I pine for the days of Barack Obama, where I didn't have to know who was president today. I didn't have to know what he was doing. I didn't care what he was doing. I had faith that he wasn't going to come out and blatantly lie about stupid stuff, that he wasn't going to make stuff up, that he wasn't going to start another war. I didn't really worry about that. And I would like to have that again. That's why I think November is so important, which is why, I'm in this weird spot, because Donald Trump is a horrible, abysmal failure. Look at where we are as a country. I place all of this at his doorstep. Every bit of this is his fault. Every bit of it. They did not react at all in the first 2 months. And now that we know that November we knew about it, he did nothing in November, did nothing in December, did nothing in January, did nothing in February, but say, oh, it's all a big hoax. He's the reason where we are where we are. That's simple. But my problem is I'm looking at Joe Biden and I'm going, Joe, you've got to do better. You've got to do much better. You've got to get your message out. And you've got to start by, on Monday we had talked a little bit about this allegation by this woman, Tara Reid, that the Biden campaign has not addressed. The campaign has. They issued one statement, said it didn't happen, and that was it. Joe Biden has never said anything about it. I understand tomorrow he's going to say something on Morning Joe, which, good. It's about damn time. But I'll tell you, I've taken a beating over this week. I brought it up on Monday, and all week long I'm answering stuff because of it. Now, the reason I bring this up is yesterday you had Chris Hayes, the beloved Chris Hayes from MSNBC, brought up the same thing, said almost identically the same things that I said, and they went a little crazier on him. I feel for him. They actually got a hashtag trending, Fire Chris Hayes, for having the audacity to say that Joe should answer for it. We need to hear a response from him. And he needs to clear the path for all of the female elected officials who are going to be hammered with this. They've got to have something where his position is. Now, whether you believe her or not, that's up to you individually. But the campaign has to address it. Joe Biden has to take this on head forward. And I said this a couple of months ago and brought it up again on Monday, just because you could see it building. And it's like anything in politics. Again, this isn't about really about Biden or anybody else. This is about the game. This is about the game of politics. This is about playing the game better, which Republicans do so much better. This is about answering the questions and not letting things linger. You know as well as I do that silence is the worst thing you can have. It's not going away. And the longer you fail to address it, the more conspiratorial things get. You've got to quash these things early. You've got to quash them often. And he hasn't done that. They've let this percolate. And now it's a story that, from what a lot of people are telling me, the reporters have looked into it and there's no credibility. She's not credible, whatever. They've attacked her. And that's one way of going about this. The other way is make your statement, call for an investigation, and have the investigation. But you can't be on the side of, I believe women only when it helps my cause. And this is where I'm struggling with this. And I know I'm going to take a lot of heat for it even more because, people think that this is about bringing Biden down. It's not. It's about being better. It's about being better than Trump and demanding better than Trump. The next president, I want to know, is going to tell me the truth. I want to know is going to stand in front of that microphone and give me fact. Not make stuff up, not ignore stuff, but actually do the job. And if it's Joe Biden, great. But you got to answer the question. So it's going to be interesting to see what Joe does tomorrow there on Morning Joe. Going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about the economy, some unemployment numbers out. You're going to want to stick around for how bad that is. Quick break, right back.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives them voice to win.
On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day 100,000 oil refinery workers went out on strike. The work stoppage was called by a coalition of 22 unions, including AFL and CIO affiliates and independent unions. They demanded a 25-cent hourly wage increase with shift differentials. Shutdowns began at once, and picket lines were up as soon as procedures were safely completed. The strike threatened to cut production in half. Union leaders called all but the California refinery workers out, who were central to the war effort in Korea. Oil barons had given refinery workers the runaround for 8 months during contract negotiations. The union had even postponed the original strike date in March to give federal mediation a chance in effecting a settlement. When this failed, President Harry Truman brought the case to the Wage Stabilization Board, which issued a ruling favorable to the industry. 80 companies demanded separate hearings for all 200 bargaining units involved. The union wanted one hearing for all. Even after this victory for the oil companies, they then refused to attend the hearings. When the board threw up its hands in mid-April, the new strike deadline was set. 8 days into the strike, the board ordered oil workers back to work, which they flat out refused. The oil workers union stated, quote, "Strikers are fighting against a stacked deck. If corporation executives are permitted to ignore workers' needs, then to manipulate the government so the right to strike is denied, collective bargaining will be destroyed." The board then set a 15-cent an hour wage cap and shift differentials. Workers were back on the job by the end of the month, having avoided possible Taft-Hartley actions from President Truman. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So they're saying 3.8 million more workers have filed for unemployment. And again, as we talked about yesterday, those numbers are generally skewed. I think the folks at the Economic Policy Institute did a really good job of saying, look, for every 10 people that do get it, you get 3 or 4 who, well, they couldn't get through. You get another 2 that just gave up and said, "Oh, the hell with it," and another like 2 or 3 that just said, "Well, I tried. It was way too complicated. I couldn't get through it. The heck with it anyway." So you're still talking about a huge number of people that are left out, and let's not forget the people who are denied for one reason or another. So when you see these numbers, 3.8 million is a lot of people. We're up to what now? It's like 35 million over the last 6 weeks. It's even bigger than that. And look, the urban areas are hit, but so are rural areas. And the fact of the matter is everybody's feeling the pinch. And here to share some thoughts on where we are with the economy and maybe where things are going to go, especially for where I'm at in rural America. I've asked Benga Al-Jalori to come talk with us. He's a senior economist there at the Center for American Progress. Benga, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So we look at these numbers and look, 3.8 million was the report. That's a huge number. I mean, it's better than the last couple of weeks, but still an enormous number. And still, I believe, underreported.
It definitely is. But to think about the context of that 3.8 million today, where everyone's almost like taking a sigh of relief, prior to March, the average number of unemployment insurance claims was about 250,000 a week. And then, during the Great Recession, we had a high of almost 700,000. And now we're talking about millions of people. And again, as you mentioned before, I made a very good point that this doesn't catch everybody, because in certain states, they made it purposely hard to get unemployment insurance so that the state doesn't have to pay out. And so even though we have like almost 35 million people, the number is so much larger, and it's just something that's so huge and so hard to wrap your head around.
And this isn't the moment to make this stuff incredibly hard to do. This is the moment where you go, we need to get money into people's hands as fast as possible so that they can stay the hell home. I mean, that's the point in this at this moment.
Exactly. That's the thing we have to realize, that this is not a simple economic crisis or some recession like we've had in the past. This is a public health crisis. And the key to solve this public health crisis is to have everyone stay at home, put in a stay-at-home order, make sure that we're not, quote-unquote, reopening the economy, which is a mistake, and then do testing and contact tracing and really tackle this pandemic. And then once we solve the pandemic, then we can start thinking about how do we have the economy recover.
Yeah, and how we start reopening things. Because I still say way too soon. If we open too soon, all of what we've just done will have been worthless.
It is. And one of the and this actually ties into the unemployment insurance, is that a number of these states are actually reopening the economy, not because they think it's safe or they want to get business back, but this is to make sure that people actually aren't eligible for unemployment insurance. So it's a way to kick people off UI, because then if you reopen the economy and a firm owner says, okay, you got to come back to work, and you're worried about your health, you're about catching the coronavirus, and you say, I don't want to go back to work, then you become a voluntary quit, and then you become ineligible for unemployment insurance.
No, that's, and I talked about that the other day, because, Lindsey Graham is out there running around going, oh, we're giving them all this money. They're going to choose to stay home. And you go, either one, you have no idea what you're talking about, or two, you're lying. Either way, still bad for someone sitting in the Senate.
Definitely. And the thing is, if you think that the $600 is going to give them more money to stay at home than to work, then what that says is that that person was really underpaid. And that's the way you have to look at it. But the point is we have people stay home, test, do contact tracing, and then make sure that we handle this virus and the virus doesn't, keep spreading. Because the thing is, the number of cases are still going up. The number of deaths are still going up. And it's not going up equally. There's a lot of disparities, geographic disparities, racial disparities, and we're starting to see it spread in rural communities, which is the biggest concern because the healthcare infrastructure in rural communities are not going to be able to handle this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I kept hearing, I don't know if you know, but last week here in the Pennsylvania state capitol, we had about 1,000 knuckleheads show up to the Capitol without masks and not worrying about social distancing, basically taunting the virus and saying, basically saying we want it. You couldn't explain to them that this is a bad idea, and the reason that you don't want to do this is because rural communities like around the Harrisburg area don't have the kind of medical infrastructure to be able to handle this stuff. You couldn't make that explanation. And
that's what's so frustrating is that once it actually hits rural communities and once it starts devastating, because we're already seeing it. There's stories up in New Hampshire. There's stories you think about Iowa and the meat packing plants where you have hundreds of people are catching the virus. And the thing is, once it hits, and once the hospitals and once the ICU beds are getting taken over, then people are going to be like, oh, well, we shouldn't have done it. But by that point, it's too late. And so we have to tackle it now, have to make the sacrifices now. And, you think about these protests, which make no sense. Even today in Michigan, there were guys who came in fully armed with, semi-automatic rifles. And it's like, you're just wondering, what are people doing? This is about a virus. This is trying to tackle this very important, because we already have over 60,000 people have died, and there's no end in sight. And that's the way, the human toll is already way too large.
But here's the thing, you said 60,000 is a huge number. It is. It's a lot of people. But in a country of 327 million, a lot of people are going, it's just a handful of people. Do we really want to, do this kind of harm to the economy? And then they give every other justification under the sun for only 60,000 people. I mean, it's only 60,000, Begga.
That's 60,000 mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, grandmothers. And what's so frustrating about this is that this is actually harming the economy, the virus spread. And the longer we let it go, the worse our economy will be. If you look at South Korea, the minute we had the same first outbreak as South Korea, they did testing, they did contact tracing, they really tried to tackle it. And because they did that, because they didn't wait, they were able to keep the economy open, and now they're able to go back. And so they're able to go back and keep their economy humming. Because we let this sit for 2-3 months, now it's worse. And now the longer we let it go and the longer we don't tackle this virus, the worse our economy is going to be. So the thing is, you're actually making it worse by doing these protests, by not having these stay-at-home, by reopening the economy too soon. You're actually making the economy worse off. So this Congressional Budget Office, they were looking and estimating numbers for the economy over the next year. They said, at the rate we're going, by the end of 2021, we'll have an unemployment rate of 10%. So that means over the next year and a half, our unemployment rate is going to be double digits, which means it's going to be in double digits for other groups, even worse in rural areas, if we don't take the steps that we need to take. And that's the problem. We're not taking the steps that we need to take. It's once we do that, then we could actually reopen the economy and have the economy flourish again.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up rural areas being affected by this the most because there aren't a lot of options for a lot of people. Once the restaurants go away, once a number of industries close up because they're expecting a lot of jobs to close up because of this. So it's going to leave rural areas in a real bind, and I don't see us having the public policy to hang on that long, especially for rural communities.
And definitely, because rural communities, while it hasn't been all doom and gloom, some places have done well. But what's kind of the ironic thing is that the places that have done well are the places that have recreation counties that have a lot of tourism. But that tourism actually caused the outbreak of the virus to hit these areas early on. So look at places up in the rural West, a lot of aging communities. And so one of the things when these companies close, a lot of times they don't come back. And that's kind of the biggest thing that we have to worry about. And that's why we need to see a bigger public policy push in D.C. We need to see a bigger public policy push directed towards smaller communities, smaller cities, rural towns, so that we don't lose them for good.
Yeah, see, I said right from the start that I don't think there should have been a dime going to corporate America. I have this belief, and you can tell me I'm wrong if you want to. But eventually it's all going to run through the corporations anyway. So you make the people at the bottom whole. All of these workers that we're saying stay home. Make sure that they're whole. Make sure that they can put food on the table, they can pay their bills, and they're not going to go broke in the process. And eventually, as long as they're still humming along, and you keep paying them until they can go back to work, until the job is there, and we make sure that nobody gets left behind in this. Instead of having a $500 billion trough for corporate America to be able to work their way through.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing is that when we talked about unemployment insurance and you had what Lindsey Graham was saying that, these people are getting paid more to stay at home instead of going to work, and they want to put all these restrictions on it. But yet when we talk about large firms and huge firms that continually get bailout, we had, just 2.5 years ago, we had that huge tax cut. There's no restrictions on them. And so and what's frustrating is that we have the kind of policies that we could have pushed and made to make sure that the economy can stay humming along. Like, for example, there's a work sharing program where people who actually don't lose their jobs don't get fired, but they get reduced hours or they're furloughed. They can still collect unemployment insurance benefits, and then when the economy recovers, they go back to that job so that you don't have to firms don't have to hire new people don't have to look for jobs, they just go back to the original job. And even Pennsylvania has this program, this work sharing program, but there was some spending on that, but it's not big push for that. So programs like that, if we do those things, that's what's going to help keep the economy moving along and help us to recover quickly.
Yeah, and this is where, again, I come back to the federal money that goes in this. And you hit on it a second ago that, most people, fortunately, if you've never had to file for unemployment, you don't know how this works. But unemployment only replaces about 30 to 40% of your lost wages. So by having that additional money from the federal spending side of it, it will actually make up the difference. And then maybe that works out because, going, okay, we're going to have this work sharing, but only being able to make $150 a week to be able to get any unemployment benefit is insane. So for me, it has to be a much more generous benefit for that kind of thing to work out.
Right, because again, this is the reason why you lose your job, or the reason why you're not at work. It's not because of productivity. It's not because the economy is tanking. It's because of this public health crisis. And the solution to solving this public health crisis is for everyone to stay at home. So we want everything to kind of stay at par. Because the other thing is, when you say, it only gives 30 to 40%, your rent doesn't go down by 30 to 40% through no fault of their own, through taking the steps they need to take to solve this public health crisis, then they're going to be adversely harmed, unfairly harmed. So that's why you want to make sure that the wage replacement is as close to 100% as possible.
And the other part of this is, you said, May 1st is coming up. The reality is for a lot of people who lost their job this month, May 1st is the end of their health insurance as well. I mean, there's so much to this, and I just don't see our federal government doing enough. I just don't. They've done some things, and they should be applauded for the little they've done. But it should have been much more, and it should have been much faster. The $1,200 that they were supposed to give everybody should be in everyone's hands by now, and it's not. They've just, in my view, they've fallen down, and that's the reason you have people, so many people out in the streets. Because look, they're trying to figure out how they're going to be able to support themselves and not lose everything they've worked for. And there's part of me that gets it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It was like, Congress has done a lot so far, and the people talk about the $3 trillion number, but this is such an unprecedented crisis that we have to think much bigger, that we have to put all hands on deck. So even the last bill had nothing to state and local governments, and state and local governments, because they have this balanced budget, are kind of pushed up against the wall in terms of trying to figure out how to pay for things and how to handle the public health, because they have to spend the money on public health. They have to spend the money on services, and they're going to have to make cuts. So to help them out, the federal government doesn't have that restriction. So the federal government should be spending a lot of money, putting a lot of money to the state and local governments so that they are able to, they don't have to cut Medicaid, which is what people are using to fight the coronavirus. So there's much more that the federal government can and should do. And as you mentioned, in a timely fashion. So even think about the $1,200, that was just a one-time payment. Even though the Treasury Secretary said that should last 10 weeks, that's ridiculous. There should be multiple payments to make sure that people are able to pay their bills, get health care when they need it, be able to take care of some issues that they have. And so That's what the government needs to do. Just think bigger, be more bold.
Do you think there's a shot at getting a universal basic income kind of thing? I know Ro Khanna has some legislation of to get people money every month till this ends. Do you think there's a shot at this? I mean, I kind of think with the window's closed on this, but I'm curious your thoughts.
I actually don't think the window's closed because of this unprecedented crisis. There's actually people are being more bold, and people are understanding. Some people are understanding the depth of this crisis. So I think people are more willing to listen to different types of policies and looking at things and seeing how people are struggling in all these different cities. And then once you start hearing the stories, the last 2 weeks we've been hearing more stories about rural communities that have been really struggling, and then people who are not able to get their money. So I think there's a window now that people are actually going to listen to a lot more policies, a lot more open policies, and there's a lot of people fighting for it. So I think there's a possibility.
No, I'd like to see it. I think it's important. I think these are things that should have been put in place after the last collapse. And, in fact, things we talked about in 2009 and 2010 and what we should be doing to make sure that the next crisis wasn't as bad as the last one. Hopefully we will do something. But the last question I've got for you, because, I haven't heard it just yet. But I've got a couple of people, kind of chirping, hey, we can't afford this, Benga. We're going to spend, $4 trillion this year or some obscene number? What do you say to the people who say we can't afford this?
I mean, there's a lot of things I can say, but basically we can't afford it. The main question I have is we can't afford not to do this. We're talking about 1 million confirmed cases. We're talking about 60,000 people who've died and more coming. And the thing is, interest rates are low, but it's such a huge crisis that this could literally wipe out towns. I mean, I would not be shocked to see small rural towns that this coronavirus wipes them out. And we can't afford that to happen. So we can do that. Now, the people who say this were the same people who were quiet during the tax cut. That was, $1.5 trillion. That's up to $2 trillion. These people are quiet when we talk about tax cuts. But then when we actually spend money to help, Main Street, help rural people, help people of color, that's when they start coming out of the woodworks and saying, oh, well, we have to worry about this. But even the Fed chairman, just yesterday said that there's nothing to talk about right now. Right now, we have to tackle this public health crisis and then the next economic crisis. And then once we get out of this, maybe we could start talking about, whether we can afford this or not. But the thing is, there's huge problems right now that need to be solved, and they're only going to be solved with huge resources, huge money spent correctly, spent to the people who need it. That's what we have to do.
I absolutely agree, and I'm hoping that we'll keep them on the right track, hold them accountable, and push them in that direction. My fear is people like McConnell get their way, and we end up, anything that we do get, we have to give up the pound of flesh of whatever wet dream fantasy they've come up with that was going to end up bite us in the behind down the road. But we'll see how this plays out. Benga Eljalori, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much.
Good stuff, as always. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you want to check out what Benga had to say, we got a piece out. Rural America is starting to feel the impact of the coronavirus. We'll get links out so you can check out his work there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
3 and 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2012. That was the day that updated National Labor Relations Board rules regarding the formation of new unions went into effect. The rules cut down on the time between when workers announce that they want to hold an election to form a union and when that election can actually take place. The rule change was aimed at cutting down delay tactics used by employers to stop unionization. For example, one tactic used by employers was to engage in a long, drawn-out legal battle over which employees could belong to a new proposed bargaining unit. The NLRB's decision helped to curb some of the worst abuses of such tactics. Rich Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO, called the new rules, quote, a modest but important step to ensure that workers who want to vote to form a union at their workplace get a fair opportunity to do so. Businesses and their allies in Congress, on the other hand, tried everything they could to fight the decision. The U.S. House of Representatives put forward bills that would make union elections much more difficult and attempted to gut the NLRB's funding. The bills did not make it through the Senate, but later that year, the opponents to the changes were able to get the new rules thrown out, claiming the vote at the NLRB did not follow proper procedures. Finally, in December 2014, the rule changes went into effect. The ability to hold a vote on whether to form a union is a core right for workers who want to improve their working conditions, their wages, and workplace safety. Throughout U.S. labor history, business interests have done everything they can to thwart the will of their workers to join together. And delaying union elections is but one of their tactics. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Washington Post reported today that the Secret Service evidently paid a Trump hotel $33,000 so that in 2017 they could stay at the hotel that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was shacked up in 137 consecutive nights. I hope they at least got, a frequent stayer club discount or something. I hope we got something out of it. 137 consecutive nights we rented a hotel room there in Trump's hotel. I think I have a serious problem with that. But it averaged about $240 a night, which is about average for the DC area. So no discount as well. But here's the good thing. Some good news today. A new website has launched, an accountability website, because I've been saying I want to know where all the stimulus money is going. I want to know where that $500 billion trough of money that Mnuchin's going to hand out. I want to know where that's going. I want to know where it's going so that we can then wealth shame those people who take it and don't need it. And here to share some thoughts on the launch of coronastimuluswatch.org, I've asked Greg Leroy to come talk with us. Greg is the executive director of the organization Good Jobs First. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, great to be back with you, Rick. How you doing?
I am great. This is a fantastic tool. This COVIDstimuluswatch.org. Again, I've been crying for this. So thank you for putting this together.
Well, we thank you for saying that. Look, we've been in the business of disclosing corporate welfare for 10 years. We actually birthed our first subsidy tracker database during the Great Recession, and it was in due to no small part to the high degree of ethical disclosure and very clean conduct of the Obama administration during that stimulus back in 09, 010, 011. We're worried this time, frankly. We raced to get this thing up really early because it's really unclear to us how transparent Trump wants to be. He's already decapitated the oversight board by firing one of the inspectors general that was going to chair it. We felt like we had to really plant a flag and make it clear we're going to grab every bit of data and we're going to make it user-friendly and public and open.
I mean, because already we've seen a couple of organizations who got the money, wealth shamed, and actually returning it. You got Ruth Chris Steakhouse.
26 companies have given back already.
You've got the Los Angeles Lakers, which why the hell are they going after money is beyond me. But, I want to know who these people are so that we can shame them if they don't need it, because there are people who are struggling that we should be helping them first.
That's exactly right. And look, we started this website with a very small number of deals. It's less than 300, because the only way anybody knows about this so far is if a company put out a press release and bragged about it and maybe got their lunch handed to them for doing that, or they're a publicly traded company, in which case they required legally to file a statement, a shareholder statement with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We know we still don't have any batch of announcements from the Treasury Department or the Small Business Administration. We also know that the Federal Reserve is going to be handing out gobs and gobs of credit lines. We're going to put it all together here.
No, and it's something that's desperately needed. And look, I said even before the legislation passed that we need a Truman-esque commission to follow every dollar, to squeeze every quarter till the eagle screams, to make sure that we get the benefit out of this money that we're borrowing and handing out to the best that we can. So having oversight to me is extremely important in this.
Amen. And look, we also still have all the money from the old stimulus and the old troubled assets relief program, the TARP program back last year, the Bush administration. We have all that stuff in our database. So when you look up a company now getting new awards under the CARES Act, or CARES 3.5, what the next one's going to be called, we show you not only that award and give you all the details that are newly disclosed, we also walk you through the history of other corporate welfare they may have gotten over the last decade or decade and a half. And we also tell you about all their ethical problems that, if they've been convicted of wage theft or union busting or polluting or discriminating based on race and sex or ripping off customers or ripping off Uncle Sam, because a lot of these companies are federal contractors. We show you all those records all in one place with one click of your mouse.
It's amazing, how many of these companies get away with, being the biggest welfare queens we know, and then do all of the other stuff on top of it. Nobody ever holds them accountable. So it's great to know that information is available out there at your website. Well,
thank you, Rick. And like I say, it's covidstimuluswatch.org. No www, just HTTPS. covidstimuluswatch.org. No hyphens or dots. And we'll be building it out as quickly as we can. I mean, Treasury has said they're going to release monthly batches of awards, and we are afraid that first batch will be a big batch, and we'll chew on it and put it up as quickly as we can, as well as the SBA and Federal Reserve money's coming out too. Yeah, and whatever may come out from subsequent bills.
Right. I mean, there's a lot for you guys to go through, especially
he wants to do this.
No, especially on the for me, it's this $500 billion slush fund that we've handed over to Mnuchin that I think is really important, but also the small business money. What we're finding out is it's not really small businesses, and it's usually the ones who are well connected, who have lobbyists, who have people who can navigate this stuff. It's not the small mom and pop down in town center who really needs it, who's getting this money.
That's exactly right. And look, we've done studies in the past, long before this recession came along, asking that very question. Even if a program is theoretically open to a company of any size, who actually really gets the money? And the answer, in every state we looked at about a third of the states, looked at a big sample of deals, is 70% of the deals, 90% of the dollars going to big multi-state, multinational companies. They are the ones that have the consultants and the site location consultants and the tax lawyers to play the game, not the small companies that are really getting crushed right now.
Yeah. See, here's the thing, and this is where my mindset has always been. I wish there wasn't a need for you. I wish there wasn't a need for this website and for the work that you guys do, because we shouldn't be giving these corporations a dime, not a red cent. Every penny of this stimulus money should have gone to the working people, and when it filters back through the corporations, that's great. But we should have been making the people whole, not these corporations.
Amen. And obviously, when you set 500 as the definition of a small company, well, that gives you some, in this case, many publicly traded companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. These aren't small companies. They don't lack access to capital. Some of them weren't even in sectors that are going to necessarily be especially hurt given the nature of their business.
No, and I look at the Lakers as a perfect example. They got I think it was $4.7 million, which to an organization that's worth $4 billion and has the wealth that the Lakers have, I don't know that they needed the $4.7 million. I know the mom and pop, I know the pizza shop down in town, I know the clothing, the small clothing store in town. I know they need it, but I don't think the Lakers really needed it.
You're exactly right. And the same thing with the hotel chains and the fast food, the Shake Shacks and the other big chains that got money. These people forget that the vast majority of hotels are not owned by those name brands. These are franchises. They're locally owned by small family businesses, and they're getting crushed. But the parent companies, who often don't employ that many people, they just lease out their identity and run reservation systems and so on, knifed in there and got the money.
Yeah, it's incredible. In fact, I know a guy who owns a hotel locally, and I'm thinking about him as we're talking about this, because you're right. The chain, they went and they got their money, but that poor guy who's got everything, his entire life savings, everything invested in this one building. There's nobody staying there.
Yeah.
Maybe we could send the Secret Service there, and maybe they could rent a room for a bunch of nights. Can you believe that? 137 consecutive nights they stayed in that hotel.
There's so many different Trump rental property stories. There's also the golf course in Scotland that ended up with military flyovers in it. It's just everywhere you look.
Yeah, I mean, it's really angering, and it's really frustrating on so many levels. So, what are you hoping comes out of this? I mean, I'm hoping, again, people go to covidstimuluswatch.org. What are you hoping comes out of this?
Well, we think that a cleaner recovery will come out of it. Look, we've already gotten many thousands of page views in the first hours this was up today. It really went viral. And we know from the Obama stimulus that one of the big reasons why that ended up being so clean was because there was 1 million eyeballs on that website called recovery.gov that the Obama administration set up. So if the Trump administration isn't going to do their version of that, and we're not sure they are, we will be that. And we will be the ones that everybody goes to see this stuff. And that means companies spying on each other, unions looking at companies, environmentalists looking at companies, tax accountants looking at companies and spying on each other. That's a good thing, because they'll turn companies in for getting money under false pretenses, or getting too much money, or laying people off despite the requirements that they maintain their payroll, or whatever those issues are. That's what keeps these things clean, is when everybody can see who got the money and what they said they were supposed to do with it.
Yeah. Do you have any faith in the? I know Nancy Pelosi set up a commission, and they're or a committee, and they're going to look into this. Do you have any faith in their ability to hold these companies accountable?
It's this oversight commission that. It's 5 members, one appointed by Pelosi, one by Schumer, one by McCarthy, and one by McConnell, and then a neutral chosen by Pelosi and McConnell, and they haven't chosen the neutral yet. I do like the first appointee that was Schumer made. His name is Bharat Ramamurthy. He's a really terrific guy who has done a lot of banking reform work with Senator Elizabeth Warren. Dallas Shalala, much less of a known entity to me. She was the appointee by Pelosi, the current Congresswoman, the former Health and Human Services Secretary under President Clinton. I don't, and then I don't know anything about the Republicans yet that have been appointed, Toomey and somebody else.
Well, Toomey's bad. There's nothing good coming out of Pat Toomey,
okay,
former
right.
president of the Club for Growth. There's not a corporate dime he isn't thrilled to see. He's bad from top to bottom. I was not happy to see that.
Okay, and he's your home state boy there, right?
Yeah, he is the junior senator here.
Yeah. So, I think a lot matters on who is appointed the chair, and I think we all need to organize and pressure them to do as good a job as the recovery board did last time. There is a separate body composed of inspectors general, very similar to the Obama stimulus. It's called the PRAC, right? Something, I forget what the P stands for, but it's the equivalent. It's like a super board of inspectors general, also charged with overseeing the money. And we certainly, the history of that last one, headed by a guy named Earl Devaney, who was the famous inspector general from the Interior Department, who was famous because he caught and got convicted Jack Abramoff, the notorious lobbyist. They did a good job, and they certainly should be independent. The trouble is, Trump has already fired the first chair-to-be of that board, putting a very stiff shot across the bow of those inspectors general that he could fire them too if he doesn't like what they do. They're obviously supposed to be independent, completely independent of political influence. That's the whole point of these offices that they were created, coming out of Watergate. So I think a lot depends on how honorable all these IGs behave, and how well the chair of the Congressional Oversight Commission acts.
Yeah, and how transparent the whole process is. The more information that gets out to groups like yours, so that the rest of us can take a look at it, and then, if need be, raise a bunch of cane.
Yes. And again, I do have faith in eyeballs. I do have faith in the wisdom of crowds. And if we succeed in keep getting all this data, getting it up quick, making it easy for people to see what's going on, sorted by state, sorted by company, sorted by industry, any way you want to slice and dice it, so you can really get the big picture, and then drill down if you need to. We can hold their feet to the fire.
I'm right there with you. Again, the website, covidstimuluswatch.org. We will get links out on social media to make sure people have an opportunity to take a look at it. And like I said, we hold them accountable. Who gets it? And if we have to wealth shame them, we do that. Greg, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work you guys do. Keep up the great stuff, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Talk to you soon, Rick. Thanks so much.
Good stuff. Greg Roy, he's the executive director there of Good Jobs First. They do some fantastic work. And again, covidstimuluswatch.org is the website. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. Chances are you may never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, inspecting an elevator, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's great to see that, there's something out there. And like I said, covidstimuluswatch.org, the website. Again, when you see the Lakers taking money, when you see these big franchises who have, enormous amounts of money and the ability to issue more shares and to get the revenue that they need from investors, you see them taking money that was designed to help small businesses and help people stay in their jobs. I got a problem with that. And look, the reality is that as we've been talking about the huge unemployment numbers, we've been talking about, the direction of the economy. A couple of folks chimed in and said, hey, look, Jeff said, I'm one of the fortunate ones who didn't get laid off. He said, but man, I'm struggling. No stimulus money, barely making the rent. He said, my paycheck is destroyed. My savings is gone. I have pulled my kids out of after school activities. Groceries are limited. Is there any relief in sight? And the reality is I don't know, because we haven't done enough to help folks like Jeff. We haven't done enough to ensure that working people, actually get a fair shake in all this. As I've been saying, we need a much more proactive government. We need a much more, active government. We need people who know what the hell they're doing. Patricia chimes in, says those last categories could be millions in California alone. Gig workers couldn't even apply for unemployment insurance until 2 days ago, and many still can't get through or learn the disposition of their claims. Freelancers who work for both W-2 and 1099 jobs because of Act 5 there are hitting hurdles. So look, you've got all these people who are outside of the regular employment models, who we were told we were going to get money to. We're going to help the self-employed. We're going to help the independent contractors. We're going to get those gig workers, those freelance workers. That's what the federal money was supposed to be for. But yet here in Pennsylvania, it was just recently, I think last Monday, that if you're a small business owner or self-employed and you've basically lost your shirt, you can apply for something. But I don't know anybody who's gotten it. And I know myself personally, when I applied for it, they said, sorry, you're not eligible. So it's this constant running around of a system that they want obstacles in the way so people don't get what they're supposed to get. And this is the wrong time to do that. I've been saying all along, now's the time when things should be flowing. You get people money as fast as possible so that they can stay home. so that they can pay the bill, so that Jeff has an option to not go to a crummy job and get himself and his family sick, that we actually do the social distancing and give people the options to do that. But here's the thing. The systems are not set up for that. The systems are set up for denial. The systems are set up to put roadblocks in place because they were made by people, like I talked about at the beginning, who just thinks everyone should die. We thin the herd. We call the elderly. Something seriously wrong with that, in my view. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
In this horrible time of economic collapse, it is truly touching to see so many corporate chieftains reaching out in solidarity with a hard-hit working class. We know they're doing this because they keep telling us they are. Practically every brand-name giant has been spending millions of dollars on PR campaigns in recent weeks, asserting that they're standing with us, declaring over and over, "We're all in this together." Except, of course, they're really not standing anywhere near us. While we're waiting in endless lines at food banks and unemployment offices, the elites are still getting fat paychecks and platinum-level health care. The severity and gross disparity of our country's present economic collapse is not simply caused by a sudden viral outbreak, but by a decades-long plutocratic policy of intentionally maximizing profits for the rich and minimizing everyone else's well-being. As the eminent economist Joseph Stiglitz rightly put it, we built an economy with no shock absorbers. Jobs, once the measure of a family's economic security, have steadily been shriveled to low-wage, unreliable work, untethered to a fair share or any share of the new wealth that workers create. In a relentless push for exorbitant short-term profits, today's executives have abandoned any pretense that a corporation is a community of interdependent interests striving to advance the common good. Instead, while the honchos are richly covered, they're washing their hands of any responsibility for the health, retirement, and other essential needs of their workforce. Rely on food stamps and other publicly funded programs, they say, even as their lobbyists and for-sale lawmakers slash the public safety net. This is Jim Hightower saying these forces of American greed have shoved millions of working families to the economic precipice, and all it takes is a virus to push them over.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember yesterday we were talking about education funding, talking about billionaire Betsy DeVos and her backdoor way of funding her pet project in vouchers, handing money to private corporations and private schools, so the people who are already sending their kids to private school can cash in. Yeah, those folks. And I asked the question, is this a situation where possibly stimulus money will be going to these charter companies who are taking public dollars, our students' dollars, while our local school districts are basically getting screwed? And I don't know the absolute answer to that. That's why I have asked Sari Beth Rosenberg to come talk with us. She's a New York public school teacher. She's a fantastic writer. In fact, she wrote the She Did That series for A&E Television and Lifetime, some of the great stuff over there. Sari, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me tonight.
So, I asked this question of, is it possible that these charter companies can get stimulus money, whereas my local public school can't? And I've gotten a bunch of answers back and forth. I'm curious what you found out.
So I've been writing this my recent project. I've been writing a series for PBS NewsHour Extra, and it's mostly about my experiences as an educator doing online learning. But when I think I tweeted about this earlier in the week, when I saw this, it's DeVos's new $180 million federal program from the CARES Act is called the Rethink K through 12 Education Models Grant. $180 million of federal funds. And I started wanting to investigate it because I'm looking into kind of like what we talked earlier when I was on last time about, are they going to start finding ways to defund public schools and put it into charter schools and private virtual learning companies? And when I saw that news item about DeVos, I started, doing some research. And basically, this to me feels like that she's finally getting to chip away at getting the school choice program passed through. Now, is it her $2 billion dream program that she's not been able to get passed through Congress? No. But this is what I've learned about this program. Number one, there's three components. One, basically, it's going to be federal money that states compete for, right? And then governors will oversee the doling out of these funds. But there's three components. First component, without getting too much into the weeds, right? The first component is microgrants, which is just another term for vouchers, right? And these microgrants are essentially going to go directly to families, something that DeVos has been wanting to do with that other program she's trying to pass through Congress. And the families will get this money. It can go towards homeschooling. It can go towards tutoring. It can go, basically, it's all designed around people who are adversely affected potentially by the coronavirus the most, but it's under those auspices, but it's a way to, again, create this microgrant voucher system that goes directly to families vis-a-vis states.
Right. And if I could chime in there real quick, one of the goals of the religious community has always been to get money from these public schools, to fund people to do the homeschooling, because they're generally, in my experience, they're the people who do the homeschooling the most, folks in the religious community, because they don't want to be part of that heathen public school. But the goal has always been to take that money and to keep it. So when you have the 19 and counting people, you get 10 grand a head, you pump out a bunch of heads. That's a lot of money.
Exactly. So the minute I saw that component, I freaked out. The second component, there's the third component I won't even get into. The second one freaked me out because it's basically money to go to what they call certified virtual learning, and the funding has to be offered to private and public, which essentially means private, right?
Right.
And they cited, do you know anything about, I started researching this. Do you know about the Florida Virtual School?
Just that they're the cyber charters, right?
Yeah, and it's the biggest one, right?
Yeah.
And there was an Indiana study a couple of years ago that just cited how much of a failure it was.
No, Pennsylvania is the home of failed cyber charter. We've got 16 of them, and not one of them have made AYP.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a public school teacher. I'm a public school teacher for the past 18 years, and I've seen what the charter school system has done to public school funding, even in New York City. So the minute that DeVos got in there, I was freaked out, and we've kind of been, watching her. This to me feels like that slippery slope phenomenon of I'm scared to see what happens next, especially since we have every state is looking to cut their education budget 15 to 20%, right? I think Hawaii said they're looking to cut 20%. So it's concerning, to say the least.
No, I said that yesterday. I go, if you believe in public education, if you like your local public school, now is the time where you have to be most diligent, because this is when, to coin the phrase from Milton Friedman, it's the ideas that are lying around when the crisis comes around that get implemented. So they've been organizing around these ideas for years. They've got huge amounts of money put into lobbying and organizing, and now they've got the crisis that they're not going to let go to waste. This is their opportunity to seize. Even if it's just a small crack, they're still opening the door.
Yeah, absolutely. And the minute that we were talking, the last time I was on, we were theorizing about, now that we're moving into this it's emergency virtual school remote learning, what's going to happen to all the forces that are looking to jump in there with the school choice movement, as well as of course, like looking to promote virtual school, anything to tear apart the public school system. Right. And I was concerned from the beginning, and I think it was mid-March. And here we are a month later. I'll
tell you though, Sari, I'm a little less concerned than I was back then, because all the parents that I'm interacting with are ready for their kids to go back to school, and they realize that this online learning is it's an awful lot of work for parents who, with two working parents, are impossible to keep up on, and two, it's an abysmal failure.
Yeah, that's true. Right. I guess I'm more concerned about like on a federal level funding, but just on an anecdotal level, I think that I have not talked to anyone, student, teacher, parent, who has said that they found this to be like the most successful teaching and learning experience that they've ever. It sucks, right? I mean, this is something that we're doing right now because we have to, because we want to save lives,
right?
And I'm gladly doing it. Trust me. But face-to-face education with a teacher and a student, not the parent, doing the teacher's job when they're doing their own work, that's, you can't replace it. You can't replace the magic of a classroom, not to sound extra corny, but you can't.
No, you
right?
can't. And I absolutely agree. And I've got 3 experts who will pick up on your expert opinion of that it sucks. I got 3 kids who are just ready to go, it sucks, I want to go back to school.
Yeah, I was reminiscing the first couple of weeks with some students. They're like, we miss sitting in class and having you tell us to move our seats so we don't talk to each other. We won't do that anymore if we can go back. I'm like, I don't know if we're going back to that. And I said to them, you know what? I miss kids chatting in class and me telling them to listen. Now it's just everyone's on mute. They have their avatars up because no one wants to show their faces anymore. I mean, for the lack of a better word, it really sucks. I miss my classroom, and I've definitely learned, and I'm writing about this in my PBS series. It's forced me to deconstruct my process as a teacher. I'm always trying to look for the silver lining, and I'm learning different things about my students that I didn't fully realize when I was in the classroom going through the routine. Different ways that they learn that I didn't necessarily notice because we weren't under a microscope like this. But I would say that going into next year, even if there wasn't a global pandemic that we're now dealing with the consequences of, I'm much more attuned, and I've always been attuned to it, but this has made me much more attuned to my students' social, emotional health. I mean, my dad's a child psychiatrist. I've always been aware of the importance of it, but now that we're going through this, it's making me realize how important it is to really, for the whole school to be checking in on that much more than we were before.
No, the socialization, people say, well, I know a couple people who homeschool, and they go, well, my child gets a much better education, sitting in their room by themselves, doing the independent learning thing with mom or dad, over their shoulder. I go, yeah, but education is more than just reading and writing and arithmetic. There's the whole socialization skills. There's problem solving. There's so many things that go into an education that you can't get on a computer screen.
Absolutely. Just like group work. You can't, someone was proposing that I set up different rooms in Zoom so kids could do little group work. It's just not the same, right? You can't replicate that. And if we are really training students, not just to memorize facts, because there's Google for that now, we are training them to work with others and problem solve for the 21st century workplace, not to sound too education.
No, you're right. But what do you say to the person, Sarah, who goes, this is the 21st century workplace. This is how life is going to be. And maybe this is the way we have to go because because of the pandemic and future pandemics, this is what we're going to have. This is the new normal.
Right. I mean, I know that's the thing. None of us can predict what that new workspace is going to look like, but I'm an optimist. I was saying to my students, like the kind of relationship and rapport that we have in Zoom, now Google Meet, it exists because at one point we were in one space together. What that's going to look like next year and the year after that before a vaccine, I don't know, but I'm hoping that it's in a socially distanced way where we can still have that far away face-to-face interaction. I don't know if you agree, but like these conversations that we're having, I mean, sure, you and I have never met in person, but when you're working with students, if you don't have that like in a room experience with them, let's put it this way. If next year, sorry to scare parents and teachers and everyone, let's say they decide that we're not safe to go back yet, we have to do remote learning. I'm going to pick up with a whole new cycle of kids. We've never been in a room together. They might know me from the hallways. It's just different. And I don't know, maybe I do need to get used to the fact that this might be the new 21st century model of working and teaching. But I really hope that we can go back to a place where we are in a room together at least every once in a while, right?
No, you're right. But the hard part of this is, I don't know that we can continue this fast of a transition towards this kind of education, because the reality is two parents today have to work. This isn't the 1950s where one income will support a family. We're in a moment where both parents have to work. They have all kinds of outside, pressures, and they're not going to be able to stand over the child while they're getting their education, which means that those kids are going to get a lesser education than they should have gotten, and the opportunity that they've got is now over.
Right. It's really upsetting. I mean, I saw a stat that like 85% of public school students will not be returning to school this year. And then the question is, what percentage will not be returning in the fall? I don't even want to put that out there because I don't want to manifest that, but I don't know at the rate we're going. I feel like this summer I'm going to have to start having some contingency plans for remote learning from the start. And
That's good. It's better to be prepared than not. I want to go back, Sari, real quick to something you said a minute ago about the budget cuts that they're already announcing are coming. Because, you listen to Mitch McConnell, who has said, there's probably not going to be any money. Let the states file bankruptcy, which we know, or at least I believe, is just a veiled kind of union busting move to punish those states where teachers have decent pensions and decent health care. I'm expecting in Pennsylvania, that's already got a massive budget shortfall, as many states have, for the budget to be just an incredible fight. And education is the one place where Republicans love to stake their ground and slash and burn. So if the federal government doesn't step in and fund this for the next couple of years, we could see massive slash and burn in education. And for a lot of kids, the only education they might get.
Across the country, 15 to 20% cuts. The AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, is saying that they're asking for $200 billion in new federal aid. And just to put $1 in federal aid. So, and then now we're looking, and if Mitch McConnell is serious, then, I mean, we don't know yet. But I mean, Cuomo's leading a bipartisan group, and I'm sure you saw that. They're asking for like $500 billion aid package. It's all up in the air. But the people who are going to lose are the public schools and the public services in the parts of New York. I'm just thinking of New York City that need it the most, who've lost the most in these last 2 months, 3 months, where they haven't been able to learn the way that they're used to learning.
Yeah, and again, it's going to come down to those communities that are already disadvantaged, who are going to be rocked by this, because my kids are pretty fortunate. We've got computers and we've got good internet, and we've got all the things that they could possibly need to be able to weather this. I think about myself as a kid growing up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and we didn't have those opportunities. In fact, a lot of times the cupboards were bare. So I see in Los Angeles where they're handing out 400,000 meals every day, and you just go, it's insane.
It's insane. Yeah. And in the city, they did a deal with Apple. So kids are getting iPads. My school was giving out Chromebooks to kids up until last weekend. They were still doing shipments, but there were some kids who didn't get their tech broke. They didn't have it for a week or two. Those are 2 crucial weeks when you're already feeling really alienated from, from everyone, from your peers, from your teacher, from the kids spend the majority of the day at the school. It's really tough.
So last question I've got for you. Any message for parents? Because look, I see it all over Facebook. I'm hearing from people who are saying, I'm going crazy. Any message for them?
My message, and this has been the message to my students, and my students a lot of them are AP students, so they're like really stressed about their tests and their scores. And listen, my advice is, and this is going to sound corny, but we just have to do the best that we can do every day. And we're never, ever going to make it like it is when we're at school. I think I accepted that fact after the first couple days. I said, okay, I have to kind of reset my expectations for the next couple of months. And it feels like a really big deal right now because we don't have an end in sight, but I'm taking it one day at a time. And there's days when I feel like that was not my best lesson. I needed to be in the room with them. And I just have to my advice is just kind of give yourself a break and know that, you know, even the little bit that you're doing to help your kid every day is going a long way. And like, let's just all hope that we go back in September. And yes, there's all these scary news reports, like how much deficits there's going to be in these kids' education. So we're thinking March, April, May, June. It's a couple months. It's crucial months. I don't want to downplay what we do as educators, but I truly believe that the teachers that I work with and all the teachers across the country, we are so determined to hit the ground running in September and make up for whatever wasn't able to get taught because you were trying to like work and also like feed your kids and then also get them to do their schoolwork. We're going to make that up in September, October, November. And I really don't think that all hope is lost. So do the best you can do every day. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm telling my students to do. We have to give ourselves a little bit of a break and a little bit of slack because you're not going to ever be able to replicate school. And that's why we need to keep our public schools funded and all the systems that go around to help support our students.
Good stuff. My daughter, said my oldest daughter's graduating this year, and she's upset that there's going to be no graduation ceremony, no walking, none of that stuff. And I said, I barely remember, my graduation day. I said, but you've got the greatest story for your grandkids, because every class goes, we're the worst class ever. You can say my class was the worst class ever. We didn't have graduation. They canceled school early, and there was a chance that we may have never come back to school.
Right. We were that bad.
So
I know.
it's a way to look at things a little bit more positively.
Exactly. And now a lot of the kids are doing like Instagram, their Instagram yearbooks and stuff. So I don't know, kids are finding creative ways to get through it. They're doing some cool TikToks. I don't know. Well, we're going to get by. Yep. I truly believe that we're going to make it through this, and
good stuff.
We'll hopefully be back in September. Let's hope for that.
Let's hope for that. Sari, I appreciate the time. Yeah. As always, real fun talking with you.
Yeah, great talking to you.
Good stuff, Sari Beth Rosenberg. A New York public school teacher, also a writer, does some great stuff. You might want to check it out. She does That series for A&E Television and Lifetime. Make sure you check it out. Also, saribeth.com is her website. Quick break, right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day 100,000 oil refinery workers went out on strike. The work stoppage was called by a coalition of 22 unions, including AFL and CIO affiliates and independent unions. They demanded a 25-cent hourly wage increase with shift differentials. Shutdowns began at once, and picket lines were up as soon as procedures were safely completed. The strike threatened to cut production in half. Union leaders called all but the California refinery workers out, who were central to the war effort in Korea. Oil barons had given refinery workers the runaround for 8 months during contract negotiations. The union had even postponed the original strike date in March to give federal mediation a chance in effecting a settlement. When this failed, President Harry Truman brought the case to the Wage Stabilization Board, which issued a ruling favorable to the industry. 80 companies demanded separate hearings for all 200 bargaining units involved. The union wanted one hearing for all. Even after this victory for the oil companies, they then refused to attend the hearings. When the board threw up its hands in mid-April, the new strike deadline was set. 8 days into the strike, the board ordered oil workers back to work, which they flat out refused. The oil workers union stated, quote, "Strikers are fighting against a stacked deck. If corporation executives are permitted to ignore workers' needs, then to manipulate the government so the right to strike is denied, collective bargaining will be destroyed." The board then set a 15-cent an hour wage cap and shift differentials. Workers were back on the job by the end of the month, having avoided possible Taft-Hartley actions from President Truman. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, as I was saying, my oldest daughter's graduating this year, and it's, you know, for us it's sad because, you know, we've gone through all these years of school, and my wife is like, you know, I wanted to see her, you know, walking, you know, the cap and gown thing, and the, you know, taking the video and the crying and the pictures and all that stuff that you do. And like I told my daughter, I seriously, I barely remember it. I know I went. I know I was there. I know they handed me some piece of paper. I can't find it. I have no idea where it is. But, you know, to have that story, I said, just think about it. In you know, 35, 40 years, you're going to look back at this with your kids or your grandkids, you know, even maybe further down the road than that, and say, you know, we were just horrible. You know, we were so bad. We were the first class in history that was canceled. We canceled half the school year. I think that's a great story. And, you know, now understand, you know, there's obviously going to be the asterisk there of, you know, there was a deadly global pandemic that went on. But, you know, I think it's kind of a cool story that, you know, maybe she'll share with her kids at some point, and then she'll remember I told her. And another way to be remembered in a positive way. Or it'll be, he was so horrible as a parent, you know, can you believe this is how he saw it? Who knows how that's going to play out? But, you know, like Sari was saying, you know, we're learning a new way of doing this, and you got to be, you know, I know people are stressing out, and this is one of the things that we've worked on as a family. You just kind of, you got to calm down, you know, whatever happens, you got to just kind of walk through this and go, we're going to get through it. There's going to be another side. We'll get there eventually. We're not there yet. So don't, you know, hurry up and rush outside and, you know, do all that stuff, but we'll get there. You know, we're going to get back to some semblance of normalcy. Hopefully come the fall, you know, when kids go back to school, you know, hopefully we don't have the huge spike that people were saying. Hopefully we do the right thing now. It quells it to the point to where we get things in place. And look, I'm hoping the drug that they're touting as a possible help actually is. I'm hoping our science community, the really smart people that are doing the work that they're doing, I'm hoping they find what we need to get through this. I'm hoping there's a way through. But my problem is I'm looking around, and every time I turn around, there's another snake oil salesman out there saying there's a magic cure. Here, send me $400 and we'll send you this magic cure. The guy out in Seattle evidently was, you know, touting this magic cure, of which, you know, they sent him a cease and desist letter and threatened to sue him. But you still got all these snake oil salesmen out there. You know, when the, what is it, chloroquine, when that was coming out, I'm going, hey, I hope this helps. I hope Trump's not an idiot and completely wrong. I hope it does save people's lives. I'm hoping it works. And we find out he was an idiot. And it actually cost people their lives. This is my problem in these moments where you start to panic and you start grasping at whatever's there and saying, oh, this is the great cure. I mean, the fact that a U.S. president, and I know we're in a new normal world. I know this is, you know, this is the new reality in which we live. But when a sitting U.S. president says, maybe we should, you know, shoot Lysol into your veins, you know, maybe we, you know, stick a giant beam of light up your backside, when that's the best option, there's a problem. Now, I know he didn't actually say shoot it into your vein. He said we should look into it, and then that's just as bad. The fact that he's on national television telling the rest of us that he doesn't have a clue and that we're going to just make stuff up, that scares me even more. So like as I said, I believe nothing that comes out of this administration. I cannot wait till November. I hope that we get somebody. And at this point, it's looking like Joe Biden. I'm hoping Joe Biden brings some calm back. I'm hoping that some trustworthiness, some honesty, and, you know, some respect. Now, understand what's going to happen, and we already know it. The right wing's going to lose their mind, and they're going to attack him at every point. And this is where you've got to be above the fray. I know Joe Biden isn't going to be midnight Ambien tweeting. I know he's not going to be on the can at 6 a.m. Tweeting nonsense about who knows what. I'm looking forward to that day. And that's why, again, November 3rd is so very important. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. How are you handling this? How are you getting through this period? Are you ready for the kids to go back to school? I know that seems to be a general theme. And like I said, it's going to make teachers an awful lot more popular. I think raises are on the horizon, even as schools are saying they need to cut budgets. But again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
(2020).
22 plants have closed because of the virus in the last 2 months, and at least 20 meat packing and food processing workers have died.
Crises at meatpacking plants, a reckoning for industrial agriculture. Scientists warn environmental destruction will lead to more pandemics. Western U.S. in beginning stages of mega drought. Plus,
this is one of the most important victories of our time.
Big win for clean water from the U.S. Supreme Court.
Really?
Yes, really.
All of those surprises and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Turns out the best present for Earth Day is the same as the best present for Mother's Day. Time away from her children.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom. See ya sometime. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it is horrible what is going on at the nation's meatpacking plants, but I will really miss meat.
Okay. Well, you're not the only one. On Tuesday, President Donald Trump signed a broadly worded executive order directing meatpacking plants to stay open during the coronavirus pandemic, designating them as critical infrastructure under the Defense Production Act in the wake of many plants closing due to large COVID-19 outbreaks and deaths among workers.
Well, I will miss meat, but it is hardly critical infrastructure.
Well, Trump's actual legal authority is murky here, but his message is clear. In the Oval Office on Tuesday, Trump said the biggest issue was shielding meatpacking companies from legal liability if they fail to protect their workers from the virus when they force them back to work.
That'll solve any liability problems where they had certain liability problems. And as you know, there's plenty of supply. It was a very unique circumstance because of liability.
That's the biggest problem, not the fact that thousands of meat packers are getting sick and dying?
According to Trump, yes. Critics say the COVID-19 shutdowns have ushered in a day of reckoning for industrial livestock farms, with U.S. farmers now forced to either feed or kill tens of thousands of livestock animals that they cannot get to market. These critics say the pandemic has exposed the weaknesses of the U.S. industrial food system, which is consolidated into just a handful of giant corporations thanks to deregulation that has led to grueling working conditions, reduced compensation for farmers, and lobbying power to block regulations requiring them to cut air and water pollution and planet-warming emissions from concentrated animal feeding operations. Meanwhile, the world's leading biodiversity experts warn that the global coronavirus pandemic is likely to be followed by even more frequent, deadly, and destructive disease outbreaks unless humanity halts relentless destruction of nature.
Fantastic.
Because that is bringing more people into contact and conflict with wild animals. Scientists with the United Nations Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity cautioned in a research letter this week, quote, "There is a single species responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic, us."
I knew it.
They say any economic recovery packages must strengthen and enforce environmental protections, or else we are, quote, essentially subsidizing emergence of future pandemics.
Well, we are, and no, they won't fix that either.
In other news, a new study warns that the western U.S. is likely already in the beginning stages of a climate change-driven megadrought.
Also fantastic.
That is a severe regional drought that lasts decades or longer. Previous historical megadroughts in North America have been triggered by natural climate cycles, but according to new research published in the journal Science, the researchers determined that man-made global warming is playing a key role here, responsible for about half the pace and the severity of the current drought, which they say appears to have started around the year 2000.
God, we really suck, don't we?
But there is some good news.
Thank you.
In a major ruling with big implications for sewage plants and other industries, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against a Maui County wastewater treatment plant that for decades has pumped millions of gallons of treated sewage into groundwater. Studies showed that some of that wastewater reached the ocean and damaged coral reefs. The Trump Environmental Protection Agency reversed its Obama-era position and argued that it was fine, and the Clean Water Act only applies to pollutants that are directly dumped in the ocean. But in a 6-3 ruling returning the case to a lower court, the justices rejected that argument. On Hawaii News Now, one of the plaintiffs, Hannah Bernard, executive director of the Hawaii Wildlife Fund, called closing that loophole huge.
If we had lost, it would have led to even worse conditions being perpetuated with no permits being necessary for polluters to go ahead and just stick a pipe into a ground near a body of water and pollute. So this is one of the most important victories of our times.
Wow, and one of the most shocking. Are you sure this came from the U.S. Supreme Court?
Yes, it is a surprise, but I'll take it.
I'll take whatever we can get. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide, please, on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we've been talking about, the sad reality is because of this pandemic, because of this crisis, Pennsylvania, from what I've seen, is looking at a $4 billion shortfall in revenue next year. That's going to be, you're not going to be able to cut that from education alone, which there are going to be some people who are going to want to, and I look at this as, one of these scary moments where the federal government is going to have to step in. And one of those areas that I have great concern for are our 14 state-owned universities who announced yesterday that they're going to freeze tuition next year at this year's rate next year, even though no one really knows what next year is going to look like. But what is this freeze going to do? What does this shortfall mean? Here to answer some of those questions, I've asked our good friend Ken Mash to come back. Ken is the president of the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, APSCUF. Ken, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Happy May Day in advance.
Happy May Day in advance to you as well. But what's this going to mean? I mean, we're looking down the barrel of some massive budget shortfalls, and Pennsylvania, unlike the federal government, doesn't get to run deficits.
Right, and it's going to be a particularly tricky situation, especially for our universities, which have been underfunded for years, have buildings and dormitories that were built and not built wisely, and therefore they're carrying debt. It's a pretty sticky situation.
And not to mention, the sad reality is, they don't have huge endowments and they were underfunded, as you pointed out from the beginning. And there's a move in this state to want to get rid of them.
Yeah, well, some people want to get rid of them. That's for sure. And it's really, I remain puzzled by the logic that some people use. There's going to be a shortfall of educated workers in this Commonwealth, and if our universities are not running, if they're not out there, I don't know what fills that gap. And people really need to pay attention to what is going on. And yeah, the federal government has to give some money to states that are affected by this most severely. They seem to have enough money to spend on businesses. And of course, the Fed seems to have enough money, not have enough money, will make enough money, produce enough money in order to be able to bail out corporations.
Yeah, but it seems very short-sighted to me to have a $500 billion trough for corporate America to feed at, but yet leaving the states high and dry. Earlier in the program we're talking about charter schools. It's been brought to my attention that there's a possibility we're going to bail out these charter operators while leaving the local public schools high and dry. And I would guess the same thing in higher ed as well.
Well, we always worry that in these crisis situations that people manipulate them in order to achieve goals that they had wanted to achieve before, and this just becomes a post hoc rationalization. So we've been hearing about, we need to close our schools, our universities can't be everything to everyone, and it's just a situation where all it's going to mean is there's going to be fewer opportunities for students from working class families to be able to be successful and to live the American dream.
I mean, at this moment, we should be talking about how do we lower the costs to get into colleges, to get those degrees. And this could be, I've been saying, almost from the beginning, that this could be, out of this crisis, we can, instead of choosing to go down all of the wrong paths towards privatization and corporate America lining their pockets, that we could actually use this moment, use this crisis to actually build the bottom up and invest in things like education, and maybe start talking about, hey, how do we make college much more affordable, if not free?
Right. And of course, people will need it more than ever. There's a lot of glossing over about how this is going to be a V-shaped recovery, and maybe it will be a V-shaped recovery for the likes of Facebook and Amazon and those big corporations, but there's going to be a lasting impact in small communities and in the cities as well. And it really is an opportunity, as you said, to examine the entire system and to look at who's getting hurt and try and lift them up, but also to look to a future where we want to bring we want to attract good employers to come to the Commonwealth, and we want our citizens to be educated and to participate and to be smart about how they participate.
Yeah, I listened to you say that, and I keep coming back to the guy we got in the White House, that none of that seems to be a priority with this administration.
Well, I was trying to avoid that, talking about it.
No, I mean, as you should, but, for me, I can't help but go to this place where, we've got a guy who, I guarantee when he was in school said, what am I ever going to need science for? And now he's president saying, hey, let's shoot, disinfectant into people or figure out how to shove light into them.
Right. Science, facts don't seem to be high priorities, and we've paid a cost for that, right? I mean, the information was out there. The science was out there. The president likes to say, who could have known this was coming? And it turns out a whole bunch of people knew it was coming. And you have to actually read the briefing. You have to actually trust people in science to explain these things. And, and we're going to learn that lesson the hard way. And I just hope people get that, just how important it is.
Yeah, the reason I bring this up is, we seem to, as a society, have, glamorized know-nothingism. We've got a dolt in the White House who, people love the fact that he doesn't know anything. I have a listener who told me if he doesn't know it, it isn't worth knowing. That kind of mentality is dangerous in that, there's a lot we don't know. And if you're not willing to learn and not willing to expand, you're going to shrivel and die. And I fear that that's, kind of the path that we've been on. And I'm hoping out of this crisis, again, looking towards an opportunity, is that we start taking things like education much more seriously. And we start talking about investing in people in the future. At least I'm hopeful of that.
Well, I'm absolutely hopeful of it. And I hope people come to understand, too, why it's important for people to have a basic foundation in general education where you learn things like critical thinking and about science and about how good decision making happens. And that doesn't mean that there aren't disagreements about policy or that there's not even room for disagreement among conservatives and liberals, but we have to start from the same fact base. And if we don't start from the same fact base, then we're just yelling at each other, and we're not going to really come up with good solutions.
Yeah. So let me ask you, what would, if you had your way, what would happen out of this? How would, I'm seeing that, Nancy Pelosi's talking about the possibility of $1 trillion package here coming down the road. hopefully giving a bunch of money to states so that they don't have to make these horrible choices of slashing and burning education, or letting people die by defunding health and human services. I'm hoping that happens, but what would you do?
What would I do with the money?
No, what would you do policy-wise? I mean, what are you guys hoping happens?
Well, generally speaking, we're hoping that money gets invested in people. And really, as I teach in my American government classes, the level of government that has the most impact on people's day-to-day lives is state governments. And we need to be able to keep the state governments functioning. And again, this is a time to double down and invest in people. If the outcome of this is that, one of our universities or two of our universities close down, and that means that opportunity goes away, and people, if people in rural communities who may not otherwise go to college wind up not going to college, that's going to be a travesty that's going to stay with us for a generation.
Yeah, because once they close those down, they don't generally reopen.
No, it just doesn't happen. And again, it's not as if our universities have been funded well over the years. We are 47, 48, 49, 50 among the states as far as funding public higher education. Our costs have gone up. And what people need to understand, too, is when it comes to public higher education, if you're not properly funding it, and I mean tuition and fees go up for public higher education, that allows the private schools to charge more too, right? Because they don't have to worry about the differential in order to attract students. And so everybody winds up paying more. We're going to wind up with more student debt in the end, and we're going to wind up, like I said, with people, people just won't have the opportunity to get to the American dream. And it's bad for everyone. Bad for everyone in the Commonwealth, because we need to prepare a generation to do the jobs for the future, to attract good employers, because that's the way we're going to continue to have money to pay for things. And if that doesn't happen, I really fear for the upcoming generation.
No, I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Ken Mash. He is the president of APSCUF, the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties. APSCUF.org is their website. Ken, I see that you are moving on. This is the last bit of your tenure as president of APSCUF. And we've had you on the show over the years, and you've always been willing to come on and share thoughts on this. I wanted to wish you the best in what you do next, but I also want to take a moment to look back, because your tenure has been, really a difficult one, with funding cuts at the state level, all of the things that have gone on, and I think you've done an excellent job.
Well, thank you very much. It's really been, the honor of a lifetime to represent wonderful people, both coaches and faculty, some of the smartest people in the world, and to be able to stand up, I think, time and time again for what's right, not just for them, but what's right for our students and what's right for the Commonwealth, too. And you're right. I spent 4 years as vice president and 6 years as president of APSCUF. It's been an interesting ride over those 10 years. And, we've faced attempts to retrench faculty members. We had a strike during this time period. We've had to fight in the legislature, and we got darn close this year before things happened with the Nellie Bly scholarships to actually get money in students' hands. So, it's been a great experience. It's a tradition in APSCUF to only serve 6 years as president, and I think that, and I'm going to go back to the classroom, and I'm very excited about that. And I'm also very excited by the fact that my good friend and colleague, Jamie Martin, will be the president. And she's just going to do a phenomenal job.
Yeah, we're looking forward to talking to her on Monday as she takes over and the challenges she's going to meet. And what advice are you giving her?
The advice I give really is to our best resources in union. We're not the biggest union We're certainly not the biggest union in the country, and we're a pretty small union in the Commonwealth. We don't have tons of money to spend, but the one resource we have is that we're smart. We know how to approach problems, and if nothing else, we are people who are extremely dedicated to our students and to the success of our universities. And so I would just advise her to make the most of the talents that exist among our colleagues.
Good stuff. Ken, it's been a pleasure having you on. It's been great knowing you and having you on the program. You've always been a good friend. I wish you the best, and I hope you'll come back and share with us how things are going down the road.
Thanks, Rick. Have a great May Day.
All righty. Thank you so much, our good friend Ken Mash. And I wish him nothing but the best. He has been a fantastic leader there for the good folks at APSCUF. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2012. That was the day that updated National Labor Relations Board rules regarding the formation of new unions went into effect. The rules cut down on the time between when workers announce that they want to hold an election to form a union and when that election can actually take place. The rule change was aimed at cutting down delay tactics used by employers to stop unionization. For example, one tactic used by employers was to engage in a long, drawn-out legal battle over which employees could belong to a new proposed bargaining unit. The NLRB's decision helped to curb some of the worst abuses of such tactics. Rich Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO, called the new rules, quote, a modest but important step to ensure that workers who want to vote to form a union at their workplace get a fair opportunity to do so. Businesses and their allies in Congress, on the other hand, tried everything they could to fight the decision. The U.S. House of Representatives put forward bills that would make union elections much more difficult and attempted to gut the NLRB's funding. The bills did not make it through the Senate, but later that year, the opponents to the changes were able to get the new rules thrown out, claiming the vote at the NLRB did not follow proper procedures. Finally, in December 2014, the rule changes went into effect. The ability to hold a vote on whether to form a union is a core right for workers who want to improve their working conditions, their wages, and workplace safety. Throughout U.S. labor history, business interests have done everything they can to thwart the will of their workers to join together. And delaying union elections is but one of their tactics. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you this: the parents of this Greta Thunberg have got to just be, just as proud as they can be. And look, this girl just amazes me every time I hear her name. Just an incredible kid. Evidently, the big story today is she's donated the $100,000 prize that she got from a Danish foundation to UNICEF to use in poor areas to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. She said, like the climate crisis, the coronavirus pandemic is a child's rights crisis. She said it will affect all children now and in the long term, but vulnerable groups will be impacted the most. She also said that I'm asking everyone to step up and join me in supporting UNICEF's vital work to save children's lives, to protect health, and continue education. Any way we could get her to run for president? Or someone with that kind of a mentality. that we actually care about people. I mean, good on her and good on her parents. I mean, just good stuff. Now you go, okay, well, there's the Swedish girl, and then you come here to crazy back to us. And as you've seen today out in Michigan, you had a bunch of nut jobs walking around with guns. And look, I don't even get the point other than you're attempting to intimidate. I seriously don't know why you would need to carry a gun around with you, especially the AR-15s and all of this stuff. I have no idea why you would want to do that. I hate carrying my wallet, let alone carrying something that weighs as much as they do, and then having to deal with. It just amazes me. But I guess whatever. But you see the conspiracy nuts out there. It's just mind blowing. So when I came across this story in New York of this Jessica Prim, she's a 37-year-old dancer from Illinois. She traveled from Illinois to New York City yesterday, had in her possession more than a dozen illegal knives, and decided it was a good time to threaten to kill Vice President Joe Biden. According to the article, she was inspired to do this because she had seen a couple of QAnon conspiracy videos. Evidently, she believes that Hillary Clinton and her assistant, Joe Biden, and Tony Podesta, they need to be taken out in the name of Babylon. And again, I haven't been up enough on the QAnon thing to know what the hell that means, but I know she's crazy. And this is the problem with having a president who panders to, the mentally deficient. Because you give these people a quote-unquote cause. And if you watched the videos out of the Capitol in Michigan, these were people who were absolutely incensed. They were out of their minds that their government, wait for it, that their government had the audacity to want them to be safe, to want them to not get sick. Here it comes, for them not to die. How dare they? And I know it's their right, evidently, but it's live free or die. So dying is this weird part of this. It doesn't mean that you get to infect everybody else. And I'm really struggling with, because I'm usually one of the people who go, you have the right to do whatever you want to do. As long as it doesn't affect me, you do what you want to do. You want to go get sick, you want to walk off the edge of a cliff and whatever, you do you, as my daughter says. But this is one of those moments where your ignorant actions, your stupidity multiplies. And there's part of me that goes, we're in this weird moment where the dim among us are finding each other. They're organizing. They're the conspiratorial folks who we used to just look at as kooks, who were on the ham radios back in the day. They're now finding each other. And they're organizing into these kind of groups, and they're really, I've watched some of these conspiratorial videos. They take just a small kernel of truth and reality, and boy, can they spin a yarn. And you get people like this who I seriously doubt did really well in ethics or critical thinking, while in school. You got these people who are willing to get a knife and drive from Illinois to New York City because she thinks she's going to be able to kill Joe Biden. There's a couple of problems with this. And look, I don't know Joe Biden's schedule, but I know that he's in Delaware. And I know she probably didn't read the map right, but New York is kind of a far ways from Delaware. I know you can go down to 95 to get it, but it would have been much quicker to go a different route. You didn't have to go all the way to New York City. And this is kind of my problem with these folks who thought she was going to get close to him with a knife. Now, fortunately, they aren't too bright. Fortunately, they do dumb stuff like this. But for every one of these people that get caught, how many of these people are walking around thinking that this was a good idea? Now, here's the weird part in this. I truly believe that she's going to end up in a psych ward somewhere, and she's not going to be held accountable. And that's a problem I have with this administration. They're pandering. They're pandering to the people who really do need help, all the while cutting that ability to get help. Scary, scary times in which we live in. And like I said, this is what we should be paying attention to, is the massive education funding cuts, because we'd like to have people smarter than her running our country. Just kind of a thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, you can download the podcast there at the website, or get the app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.